welcome back. So I'm at a different table today. I'm trying to figure out where I can have enough space to do this because I usually do several at a time. Some of the things we're going to be using is nice big pieces of watercolor paper, or the heavier kind of sketch paper if you have it. You can do it, actually you can do a lot of things. You can do it with newspaper, which is quite thin, but if you have hodgepodge or anything like that and then you glue a couple pieces together, it makes it a little bit more firm. And then what you can do is just paint directly on it, so it's quite handy. I've got my trusty spray bottle. I've got some watercolors. And this is just for the first part of what we're doing. I just wanted to show you a couple of different ways you can do this. So I just got a big container of watercolors. It's the one thing I still haven't hung up yet. And then I also have, these are the blocks I was telling you about. They look like a big, almost like, you know, this chalk for writing on the sidewalks? They kind of remind me of those. And that's what they look like. They just look like a big block of stuff. So if you ever have the opportunity to get these, I'd say go for it because they're way too much fun. They're not paying me anything to do this. I'm just saying that I love these. So if you like them, if you like what they do when you see me play with them, then I'd say get some because they're fun. I have far too much fun with them. A little foam brush, just a palette. If you've seen in some of my previous videos, I use a nice glass palette for easy cleanup. It works with watercolors too. You can use acrylics for this exercise. I've done it before, and you'll see some of the cards that I will use as demonstration cards later on are going to be with the same, with some of the acrylics that I've used before in previous videos and things like that. I just noticed that my big bruise is visible. Sorry about that. I was moving. I had a fence that blew down in a storm a couple weeks ago, and some neighborhood girls and I moved it on Sunday. So of course now we're all looking like we've been beat up by a fence, basically. So I apologize if that freaks you out. It's nothing serious. It's just a fence. So, and I think it's really simple, this one. So that's pretty much all we're going to be using for this step. Later on, we'll get into using some colored pens, markers, ink pens, stamps. We'll do a little bit of stamps. What else is there? I'm trying to think of all the things. I use so many different things for these cards, and they're different every single time. So the ones that I've showed you in the picture for the welcome, those are some of the ones that I've done, that I've kept for myself. But every time I do them, they're a little bit different. And you can do them in any language. You can do them, I've done them custom orders for them for people in different languages in different parts of the world. So this will be really fun because this way everyone can make them for themselves and really put their own touch on them, and I'm really looking forward to that. So if you do want to share what they look like, what yours turn out like, I'd love to see them. I think that would be fun. I can't think of anything else off the top of my head. I've used paint pens and stuff like that, but when we sit down, I'll sit down at the little table with my little spot later. This is just so I have room over here. I'm at the other end of my studio right now. Makes it sound so huge. It's basically a shed, but you know, it has two ends. So, and yeah, that's all I can really think of for that. So I'm going to show you how I usually get started. I try to use a fairly big sheet. These ones are, what size are these ones? They are 30 centimeters by 42 centimeters. And the reason for that is, depending on how you want to split them up later, we're going to be folding them, and you can either tear them or cut them. So you want to have a fairly large piece so that you have cards that don't end up being like super tiny. I mean, you can, if you want to have like a tiny pocket set, you can absolutely do any size you want. But for demonstrations, I usually start with a fairly good sized piece of paper just so that you can see what the heck I'm doing. So I'm going to start off, I think, with the simplest. I'm going to do, because I think a lot of people, and you can do this with either, these are liquid acrylics, or liquid watercolors, but if you have acrylics Or if you have the cake watercolors, you know, the ones that, with the really wild colors that kids tend to get for like Christmas and stuff. You can always steal your kids' watercolors. I won't say anything. And then just use those ones. Just make sure you wet your paper down first a little bit. Not too much if it's not a terribly thick paper. But, because it'll disintegrate. You'll notice that after trying that a couple times. I'm going to do a cool color one and a warm color one to start out with. And then with watercolors. But you can use, like I said, you can absolutely use watercolors, acrylics, ink. You can do some that are just ink. Like if they're just, if you have, you know, markers kicking around. Just regular old markers. They don't have to be anything fancy. They can just be something fun that maybe your kids have kicking around. And you can use those. Ooh, I love that turquoise, it's so yummy. So basically whatever you have on hand, I'm going to show you, like I said, a few different ideas for what you can do. I'll show you the basics of doing large sheets and then splitting them up. And then I'll also tear up a couple of blank ones like this and then show you how to play with those as well with just super simple materials that you might have. And I'm just, simplest thing imaginable, foam brush, easy peasy. I'm trying to keep this as, you know, simple as possible so that none of us have to go running to the craft store while we're supposed to be in lockdown, because that would just be cruel. I mean, not that I wouldn't mind having a craft store entirely to myself. That would be pretty awesome. I can't say that that would not be the most fun thing I've ever done. But it's probably not a good idea. Just saying. So you're really close to each other. Oh, oh, that one is really on there. Oh my. Pretend you didn't see that. Don't ever tell my dentist that I do that. Watercolor. It's lovely. So, I'll regret that later. When you blow off leftover watercolor like that and then wash the floor, you discover that you make very pretty patterns on the floor that you weren't planning on. Alright, so I'm going to, and these are just 3 warm colors, just like a whatever orange, a pink, and a yellow. And the 3 cool colors was a turquoise, a darker blue, and a green. It was super simple, 3 colors for each. Doesn't have to be super complicated in the beginning because the details are what complicate it later. Scooch that out of the way. Scooch that out of the way so I'm not spraying everything in the world. And how's this? We just get right into it this time, huh? Figured I didn't need to talk so much this time. And you'll see it, just a smooch, tiny bit on there. And then on the wet paper, it spreads so prettily. And it doesn't have to be particularly fancy or spectacular in any way. You don't have to go right to the edges, which is great, I find. You can just keep it. I try to get it all the way across the foam brush because foam brushes tend to suck up everything anyway. So I try to get it right across the whole edge of the foam brush. And you can go right to the edges. You don't have to. I go almost to the edges. It doesn't really matter because you're going to be cutting it up anyway. So it's not like we're getting super fancy. But you can see, this one that I'm starting off with, this is a little bit more, it's like a sketch paper. So it starts, you can see, you get these crumblies. They'll brush off when it dries. If you don't work too hard at it. If you work too hard at it, you'll go right through the paper. Don't recommend that. But that just means that on the next time you spray, you go really light with the brush. Even I have a heavy hand sometimes. And I'm going from lightest color to darkest color since I'm using the same one. And I'm just gonna, and there's no real particular rhyme or reason to what I'm doing. just get the color on there as much as I can, and I think I like that. And then I'll do some of the dark as well. And that can be, you can do something different with that if you want, and just do, because that way not all of your cards will have exactly the same thing on them. So you can do something quite fun, and then later on when you break it all apart and cut it all apart, you've got these interesting patterns to start with. So that's that poor sad wet piece of paper with its crumbly bits. And I'm showing it to you on sketch paper so that you can see that it does actually work. If you have watercolor paper, go ahead and use watercolor paper, it's fine too. Absolutely. But I just wanted to show you that you can use what you have at home. It's good to have paper towel handy. I tend to make a mess regardless. No matter how much paper towel I set aside for myself, I make a tragic mess. Story of my life. There. Now, and you can also do, if you feel like you've put too much water on your paper, one thing you can also do is take your paper towel and do blotting randomly here and there. And that will also give you another pattern on there, and it'll dry your paper quicker. So it's just different things you can do, different ideas. All right, so this one is going to be warm colors. And I'm going to do a cheat and just take it off the brush. You can get a fresh brush, totally. I would recommend it if you're not used to mucking about with colors too much, because it can really be frustrating if you mix your cool colors with your warm colors and get muddy stuff. I particularly don't care, simply because I sometimes enjoy muddy colors, so it really just depends on what you like. Oop, you're still starting to get, sorry. Still getting used to this whole filming thing. Okay. Now, there we go. And lightest color first, like I said, just because it's easier. And just, ooh, that's a lovely mustard. I like that one. It's pretty. I kind of feel like going to the edge with that one. It's quite pretty. And you can see as you spray it, even if it went on blobby in some spots, it kind of spreads it out a little bit. And like I said, I'm not doing any kind of patterns or anything. I'm just kind of plopping it on there. Ooh, I like that. That is an awesome orange. Okay. I'm going to try not to make so many crumbs this time. I mean, like I said, they brush off afterwards, but I'm not a big fan of crumbs. Ooh. Love that. I'm just going to leave that just like that, because I like it. Oh, this pinkish or reddish color is amazing. The word that I just used was amazing, but I got so excited about the pinkish reddish color. It came out so very funny. So, look at that. Oh, so pretty. And you can lift them up and let them run, let the colors run down too. So there's a few different things you can do with them. I'm just going to swaths of color, and you'll see what I'm going to do afterwards is when I tear them up, I'm going to mix warm and cool colors in the deck. So you're not going to have all of one kind. I mean, you can do a monochrome deck if you want to. Just going to run a little bit because that's fun for me. I'm trying to make a million drips on the table. Not that it matters. I've used this table for so many things now. It's permanently covered in horrible paint and who knows what else. All the things. And then when it drips in ways that you like, you can just lay it down flat and let it dry. If you want it to drip more, you can give it an extra little spray and just hang on to it. I sometimes will hang up a piece of twine and then just hang them from it and let them drool on their own. Just depends on what you like to do. Pretty easy going with these projects. This one is actually, I like this one because it's quite relaxing. You don't have to, there's no real pressure to create a masterpiece. We're just having some fun and creating lovely personal reminders for ourselves. So that's those. And again, you can take a cloth or a paper towel and dab and get more patterns and more colors that come through and different things that happen. So you can see, and I'm just going to lay them flat here to dry. And then you can see how it just sort of takes away a little bit of the color. It doesn't take up much. And it leaves like this neat rag pattern in the paint, which I love. So, that's that. All right, now I will also show you the Inktense blocks. The reason I'm doing all this first, in like the first section with the materials, is because they take a few minutes to dry, so I'd rather get that part out of the way first, and then I don't have to wait for them to dry while I do the next step. And then these ones, and I'm just going to do them right in place so they can dry where they're sitting. Not going to step on you? No, you're right behind me. Puppy's right behind me, he's cheeky monkey. So, a couple nice big pieces of paper. Dun, dun, dun. Remove the pad so I can stop spraying the poor thing. Doop. There we go. Now, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to do a warm and a cool. And you can do a warm and a cool, or you can do a warm color one and a cool color one, and one with like purples and blues, or you know what I mean? And then you can have 3 different colors that you want to mix together. It's all up to your imagination. This first starting spot is literally just playing with colors. All we're doing is having a little bit of fun time. And, you know me and my turquoise, so I'm just going to take, and they look like a block. And you just run them over it, and you can see how they spread out. I'm doing the same thing I did with the foam brush, but I'm using this directly on the paper. And you can take your fingers, do a bit of fun stuff with it, just mess around, spread it. With a watercolor paper, you can really get into some texture. With this sketch paper, you can't really, because you'll just rip it apart. I'm just going to do that one, and maybe a little bit darker. Kind of feeling like a really blue. Maybe. I'm just making little dots of it, like I'm skipping across the paper. Because I don't want it everywhere, just little bits of some places. It's fun. Okay. And I will do the same thing with the warm colors. And you can see with these, depending on what you do with them, you can smooth them. Like I said, it's much easier on watercolor paper because I can actually feel under my finger that it's making pebbles. But you can smooth it out and blend it, and it looks very much like watercolor when you're done. But it actually has a permanence to it that defies watercolor paper in ways I have never experienced before. And I absolutely love it. I want this pink one, and the puppy's going to have a temper tantrum, so just be warned. He's having a hissy fit. He's over there doing his huffy huffies. Yes, huff, huff, huff. We hear you, huff, huff. So angry. So I'm just going to do yellow. And you'll see it gets all over your fingers. Try to keep your clothing out of it because it'll be there forever. If it gets on your clothing, expect it to never leave. It's not like acrylics, it's not going to wash out. Let's see, there we go. He's beating up the pillow. Apparently the pillow deserved it. And I'm just going to skip across with the red like I did with that one. Boop, 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 like I did with the dark blue. And you can see, you get very soft with the watercolors. You can get very soft with these as well on watercolor paper. So I'm just going to go through. And part of the reason that I do like to smooth it around a little bit and mess with it is because when we do go back in to do our affirmations, we're also going to be looking for patterns in the paint to work into our affirmations. So that's basically step one in all of its messy glory with entertainment by Puppy. I will let these dry and I will be back shortly. See you soon.